I still remember the feel of that morning light on my kitchen floor. Soft. Warm. Ordinary, the kind of light that usually means it's going to be a good day. My mint green dress was hanging on the closet door, freshly steamed. My shoes were polished the night before and lined up neatly by the rug. I had even prepared a small breakfast, though I was too nervous to eat. My hands kept brushing over the gift on the table, a simple silver box wrapped with a white ribbon. Inside was the pair of pearl earrings I planned to give my new daughter-in-law. A quiet welcome into the family. I thought I was getting ready for my son's wedding. I thought that morning marked a beginning. Then the phone rang. It was Adam. I smiled before I answered, a soft, hopeful smile I wish I'd never made. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said. His voice didn't match the day. Flat. Cold. Like he had rehearsed it. "Mom, don't bother coming to the wedding." I felt my breath stop. Just stop. "Adam? What do you mean?" I'm already dressed." There was a long silence, the kind that stretches something inside your chest until it hurts. Then he spoke again. "It happened yesterday." Just like that. No apology. No tremble in his voice. No explanation. Yesterday. A whole wedding. A ceremony. A moment mothers wait for, and I wasn't even told the date had changed. I stared at my reflection in the microwave door, that silly mint green dress, my hair curled, my eyes bright with expectation, and I felt something inside me collapse quietly. Not a scream. Not anger. Just a breaking. "Why?" I whispered, but he didn't answer. He hung up before the word finished leaving my mouth. I stood there for a long moment, holding a silent phone in one hand and the edge of the table with the other, trying not to fall. My house felt too still. The gift sat untouched beside me. The air felt heavy, like even the walls knew what this meant. And that's when I realized this wasn't sudden. This wasn't a mistake. This was the final cut, in a long line of cuts I had been trying not to see. The wedding wasn't the beginning. It was the point where everything finally snapped. The point where the truth, all of it, would have to come out. Because what they didn't know, and what they never expected, was that I wasn't as powerless as they thought. Before we go on, tell me where you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories coming soon. People assume loneliness arrives all at once, like a storm hitting a quiet town. But in my life, it came slowly. Softly. Almost politely. It came through changes so small I kept telling myself they weren't real. My days used to be predictable in the sweetest way. I would wake up early, make a pot of tea, and sit by the window watching the neighborhood kids walk to school. Sometimes Adam would call on his way to work, just to say morning, Mom. Those little calls used to carry me through hours of chores and errands. I would smile for no reason, just knowing he thought of me. Back then, it felt like we were still a team, him building his life, me cheering him on. My house was humble, but it was warm. A place where Adam always knew he could come home, even as a grown man. I kept his old trophies on a shelf near the hallway, the ones from his school soccer days. I kept his photos in the living room, the ones where he still had that gap in his smile from losing his baby teeth. I kept everything because that's what mothers do. We hold pieces of the past so our children can grow without fear. When my husband passed, he left Adam an inheritance, something meant to give him a stable start in life. He trusted me to watch over it until Adam was steady on his feet. At the time, I thought it was simply a formality, a quiet precaution from a man who planned for everything. But the calls became shorter. Then less frequent. Then replaced by texts that sounded nothing like him. At first, I blamed work, stress, adulthood. I told myself it was normal. Children grow up, they get busy. But in the quiet moments, in the warm kitchen light, in the silence of early mornings, I felt something I had never felt with him before. Distance. A small, careful space forming between us. One I didn't understand, and one I wasn't ready to admit was growing. I first met Karina low on a warm Saturday afternoon, the kind where the sun sits low and gentle. Adam had invited me for lunch at a small cafe near his apartment. I remember taking extra care with my outfit, nothing fancy, just a soft blue blouse and a pair of earrings Adam once bought me for Mother's Day. I wanted to make a good impression. I wanted his girlfriend to feel welcomed, not judged. When I arrived, they were already seated. Adam stood and hugged me quickly, but Karina only offered a polite smile, the kind that looks perfect but never reaches the eyes. "Nice to finally meet you, Ms. Morgan," she said, her voice smooth, almost measured. "Please, call me Evelyn," I replied. She nodded, but her eyes flicked down to my outfit, then to my old purse, then back to her perfectly manicured nails. It wasn't cruel, just assessing. Like she was deciding what box to put me in. Over lunch, Adam tried his best to keep the conversation going. He talked about work, a new project, his plans for the future. I noticed Karina touching his arm each time he mentioned something he was proud of, but every time I added a comment or memory, she grew strangely stiff. At one point, when Adam stepped away to take a phone call, Karina leaned across the table slightly. "Adam cares a lot about appearances," she said quietly. "He really wants to move up in life. I'm just trying to help him get there." There was nothing wrong with her words. It was the way she said them, as if I didn't belong in the picture she was painting. When Adam returned, she slipped her hand into his and smiled sweetly. But something small and cold had already settled in my chest. A tiny warning. A feeling I brushed aside, because I wanted to believe she cared for him. A few weeks after that cafe lunch, Adam invited me to a small family barbecue at the park. Nothing fancy, just a few cousins, some folding chairs, and the smell of charcoal drifting through the air. I remember packing a big bowl of pasta salad because it was Adam's favorite when he was a boy. I thought it would make him smile. When I arrived, the laughter was already loud, and children were running around the playground. I spotted Adam near the grill, talking with one of his cousins. Karina was beside him, flawless as always, wearing a sundress and sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. I waved. Adam waved back. But Karina, she hesitated. Just a flicker, barely a second, but enough to sting. Still, I pushed the feeling aside and walked over. "You made it," Adam said, giving me a quick hug. "I wasn't sure you'd come." That surprised me. "I come every year," I said. "Why wouldn't I?" Before he could answer, Karina chimed in. "Oh, we weren't sure you got the message. Things have been a little busy. You know how it is. Busy. A word people use when they don't want to say the truth." I set the bowl of pasta salad on the table and stepped back. As I turned, I caught a moment, one I didn't fully understand until much later. Karina leaned in close to Adam. Too close. Her voice was low, but not low enough. "Remember what we talked about," she whispered. "We don't need her at every gathering. We're building our own life." Adam didn't respond, but he didn't step away either. I pretended I hadn't heard. I smiled at the children playing. I told myself I was imagining things. But something inside me, something quiet and steady, felt its first real crack. A few days after the barbecue, Adam stopped by my house unexpectedly. He didn't sit down the way he used to. He didn't wander into the kitchen looking for leftovers, or tease me about keeping the thermostat too low. He just stood near the doorway, shifting from foot to foot like a man carrying someone else's words. "Mom," he said, clearing his throat, "can we talk about something important?" My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice calm. "Of course. What's going on?" He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit from childhood, then took a deep breath. "It's about the wedding," he said. "Karina and I are under a lot of pressure. There are deposits, planning fees, the venue, things add up fast. And, well, I thought maybe you could help out more." More. That word hung in the air like a shadow. I had already slipped them a few $100s here and there, for emergencies, for unexpected costs, for things Adam claimed were stressing Karina out. But he spoke now as if I'd given nothing at all. "I can try," I said slowly. "How much do you need?" He hesitated before saying the number. It wasn't impossible for me, but it wasn't small. It meant cutting back on my own groceries, delaying a few bills. Still, I nodded. I wanted to support him, to ease his worry. But then Adam added one more line, almost mechanically. Karina thinks it'll show her family we're stable. Her family. Stable. As if my help was a performance for strangers. I handed him the check anyway. And he took it without noticing how tight my smile had become. That was the first moment I realized the requests weren't coming from him at all. They were coming through him. And that truth settled heavier than any bill ever could. A week later, Adam invited me to a small dinner at Karina's apartment. He said it was just to catch up, but I sensed there was more to it, a tone in his voice I couldn't quite place. Still, I went. I kept trying, even when it hurt. Karina greeted me at the door with a bright smile, the kind you'd expect from someone welcoming an honored guest. But something in her eyes, it was sharp. Calculated. Her hand rested lightly on Adam's arm, almost possessive. "Evelyn, come in," she said sweetly. "We've been looking forward to this." Her apartment was spotless, expensive furniture, coordinated art on the walls, scented candles burning in every corner. It felt like stepping into a magazine spread instead of a home. I wondered how much of Adam's money had gone into making it look like that. During dinner, Karina kept the conversation controlled. She asked questions, but they weren't really questions, more like little tests. "So, Evelyn, do you still work at the community center? That must be fulfilling, even if it's not financially rewarding." Her voice was calm, but the message was clear: you don't fit in our world. I smiled politely. "I enjoy what I do." Karina nodded, the way someone nods when they've already decided your answer doesn't matter. Every compliment she gave Adam included a subtle dig at me. "He's had to learn to be independent," she said, brushing his hand. "He didn't always have people pushing him to go after bigger things." Adam didn't notice. Or he pretended not to. Later, when I stood to leave, Karina hugged me, lightly, carefully. "So glad you came," she whispered. But her hands stayed cold. And her smile vanished the moment she turned away. As the months moved closer to the wedding, I tried to stay hopeful. I told myself things would get better once the tension of planning passed. But the truth showed itself in small, uneasy ways. One afternoon, Adam stopped by for a quick visit. He sat at my kitchen table, tapping his foot restlessly against the floor. He kept checking his phone, eyes darting to every notification. "So," I said gently, "have you two picked a venue yet? I'd love to help with anything. Flowers, invitations, anything at all." He hesitated, and that hesitation cut deeper than any answer could. "Well, Karina's handling most of it," he said. "She has a vision, and she thinks too many opinions might complicate things." Complicate things. That was the second time he'd used her words instead of his own. I forced a small smile. "I understand. But if there's a guest list, just let me know when you finalize it. I want to make sure I'm available on the right date." Another pause. "Oh. Yeah. We're still finalizing." But his eyes dropped, and his shoulders tensed, the same way they used to when he lied as a child. I could feel the truth sitting between us, heavy and silent, but I didn't dare lift it. A few days later, I ran into Tara Benson, the young woman who worked part-time as a planner for community events. She knew Adam from college and mentioned she had seen him and Karina recently. "Oh, they're planning something big," she said with a grin. "Lots of details." Karina was very specific about the guest communication. Specific. That word stayed with me all the way home. I realized then that the wedding wasn't just being planned, it was being controlled. And I wasn't part of the plan. About 2 weeks later, something happened that should have been small, ordinary even, but it didn't feel small at all. I received a text from Adam in the early evening. "Mom, did you get the save the date card?" Karina mailed them out. My heart lifted for a moment. At least there was progress. At least I was included. But when I checked my mailbox, it was empty. No envelope. No card. Nothing. I brushed it off at first. Maybe it would come tomorrow. Maybe it got mixed in with someone else's mail. Mistakes happen all the time. The next day came. Still nothing. I sent Adam a gentle message. Nothing arrived yet, sweetheart. Maybe it's delayed. He didn't reply until hours later. And his message felt off. Karina said she definitely mailed it. She thinks maybe the address book needs updating. The address book. My address, the same address Adam grew up in, the one he visited his whole life, suddenly needed updating. A few days later, I decided to ask Karina directly. I didn't accuse her. I just said, I think there was a mix-up with the save the date. Mine must have gotten lost. She looked at me with a smile that was too quick, too smooth. Oh no, Evelyn. I'm sure it went out. Maybe the mail system is just slow. You know how unreliable it can be in older neighborhoods. Older neighborhoods. Another tiny slice disguised in polite words. When I walked away, I heard her whisper to someone on the phone, laughing lightly, I told you she wouldn't say anything. A lost card shouldn't break a person. But this wasn't lost. This was deliberate. And it was only the beginning. Despite everything, the missing card, the strange silences, the careful looks, I kept preparing for the wedding. Hope can be stubborn that way. It clings even when it shouldn't, even when every sign tells you to let go. One quiet Sunday morning, I stood in my bedroom holding the mint green dress against my body. I had chosen it weeks earlier, long before the tension sharpened. It flowed gently at the hem and had a soft shimmer when the light hit it. It wasn't expensive, but it made me feel calm, graceful, like a mother should feel on her son's wedding day. I laid it out on the bed, smoothing the fabric with my palms. Then I opened the small velvet box that held the pearl earrings I planned to give Karina. They were my late husband's last gift to me before Adam was born. I had worn them only twice in my life. Giving them to her was meant to say, I welcome you. I trust you. I accept you as family. I wrapped them in silver paper and tied the ribbon 3 times to make sure it held. As I placed the box on the kitchen table, I felt a small flutter in my chest, something like nerves mixed with pride. Later that afternoon, I went to the salon to get my hair trimmed. The stylist, someone I'd known for years, asked about the wedding. I told her everything was coming along. I smiled, even though the smile felt thin. You must be excited, she said warmly. I am, I replied. And a part of me was. Hope still lived in the cracks. I wanted to believe Adam would remember who had stood by him his whole life. I wanted to believe I still had a place beside him. But deep down, a quiet part of me was already bracing for something I couldn't name yet. Something I didn't want to see. The morning of the wedding arrived with a quiet kind of excitement, the kind that hums softly in your chest. I woke up before the sun, the way I used to on Adam's first day of school, wanting everything to be perfect. I brewed tea, though my hands shook a little as I poured. I kept glancing at the clock, expecting a text, a call, a small update. Anything. By 9 o'clock, I had styled my hair and slipped into the mint green dress. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric and whispering to myself, it's going to be a beautiful day. The gift sat on the kitchen table, the white ribbon tied neatly, waiting to be placed into my purse. But still, no call. Around 10, I checked my phone again. Nothing. At 11, I paced the living room quietly, passing by the shelf where Adam's old trophies still sat. I touched the edge of one, his soccer championship from middle school, and I felt a memory rise, me cheering louder than anyone, him running into my arms after the final goal. How did we get here? How did that little boy grow into a man who barely spoke to me? By noon, the silence had grown heavy. I tried calling him, once, then twice. Both times, the phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. Hey, it's Adam. Leave a message. I didn't leave one. My voice felt stuck somewhere behind my ribs. I walked to the window and watched a couple across the street loading flowers into their car. They looked happy, like guests on their way to a celebration. My celebration. My son's celebration. and I wasn't part of any of it. Still, I stayed ready, dressed, waiting, holding on to a hope that had already begun to crumble. But I didn't know the worst was still coming. By early afternoon, the waiting had become unbearable. The house was too quiet, the clock too loud. Every minute felt heavier than the last. I kept telling myself, he's busy, it's his wedding day, he'll call any moment. But deep down, something darker had already started whispering. Around 3 o'clock, my phone finally buzzed. I rushed to it, my heart lifting so fast it almost hurt. I expected joy, excitement, something bright. Instead, it was a short message from Adam, call you in a bit. Just 4 words. Not even a love you, Mom. Still, I held on to them. I sat at the table with the pearl earrings beside me, hands folded, waiting for my phone to ring again. It didn't. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2. The sun dipped low, turning the living room gold, and for a moment I saw myself reflected in the window, dressed up, hair done, eyes hopeful and tired all at once. A mother waiting for an invitation she didn't realize had already been taken away. Then, at sunset, my phone finally rang. Adam? I answered quickly, breath trembling. He didn't even say hello. Mom, don't bother coming. My throat closed. What? Adam, I'm ready. I'm dressed. Just tell me where it already happened, he said softly, like he didn't want to hear his own words. The wedding was yesterday. Yesterday. A whole day. A ceremony. A celebration. And no one thought to tell me. My hand shook so hard the phone nearly slipped from my fingers. The mint green dress felt too tight, the room too small. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. But Adam didn't answer. The line went silent. And that silence was the moment my world cracked open. That night, after the phone call, I didn't change out of my dress. I didn't take off my shoes. I didn't unwrap my hair or wash my face. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the small silver gift box, the pearl earrings meant for a daughter-in-law who never wanted me there. Hours passed without me noticing. The house grew darker, then quiet, then still. At some point, the street lights flickered on outside, casting faint yellow lines across the floor. But I didn't move. My hands stayed folded in my lap, the fabric of my dress wrinkling beneath trembling fingers. Grief doesn't always arrive with tears. Sometimes it comes as a cold, heavy calm, like your body is trying to protect you from a pain too sharp to feel all at once. I kept replaying the day in my mind, the empty hours, the silence, the gift untouched, the reflection in the window of a mother dressed for a celebration she was never invited to. Around midnight, my neighbor, Ms. Ruth Garvey, knocked on the door. She must have seen the light still on. Evelyn, she called softly. Are you all right? I opened the door halfway, unable to speak. Her eyes widened when she saw my dress, my makeup smudged at the corners, the ribboned box still on the table behind me. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered, stepping inside. What happened? The words came out in a quiet, hollow voice. He told me not to come, because it already happened. Ruth covered her mouth, shaking her head in disbelief. But then she placed a gentle hand on mine, grounding me, steadying me. That's cruelty, Evelyn. Not a mistake. And for the first time since the call, something flickered inside me. Not anger. Not vengeance. Just a tiny spark of awareness. A sense that this was the moment everything would begin to change. After Ms. Ruth left, I sat alone again, but something in me had shifted. The silence still hurt, but it no longer swallowed me whole. I felt awake in a painful way, as if a curtain had finally been pulled back. I stood up slowly, pressing my palm against the table for balance. The dress felt heavy on my shoulders, but I didn't take it off. Not yet. I needed to move, to breathe, to find something solid under my feet again. My eyes drifted toward the hallway closet, the one where I kept the last box of my late husband, Thomas's belongings. I hadn't opened it in years. Everything inside felt too final, too sacred. But tonight, the box called to me like a voice from a steadier time. I pulled it down, the cardboard soft with age. Dust rose as I lifted the lid. Inside were the familiar things, his old watch, a couple of letters, the faded handkerchief he always carried in his pocket. And then something I didn't expect, a small brass key taped to the inside of the lid. I frowned, lifting it carefully. I didn't remember seeing it before. Underneath the letters, wrapped in a thin brown envelope, was a slip of paper in my husband's handwriting. For Evelyn, when you need strength. This opens the safe. A little tremor went through me. The safe. The one in the back of our bedroom closet that I hadn't touched since he passed. For a long moment, I just held the key in my hand. I felt grief, yes, but I also felt something else. A tiny rise inside my chest. A breath of power. A whisper that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. This was the first step. I could feel it. I walked to the bedroom slowly, holding the brass key as if it were something alive, small, warm, humming with a meaning I didn't yet understand. The house felt different now. Still quiet, still dim, but no longer suffocating. It was as if the walls were waiting with me, holding their breath. The safe was tucked behind an old stack of blankets in the closet. I hadn't opened it since the week after my husband passed, when grief made everything feel blurry and impossible. Back then, I couldn't bear to look through our past. Tonight, the past felt like the only thing steady enough to hold on to. I knelt down and brushed my fingers over the cold metal door. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper. A need to understand. A need for truth. The key slid into the lock more smoothly than I expected. A soft click. The kind of sound that feels final and beginning all at once. Inside were several envelopes, neatly arranged. Each one had my husband's handwriting on the front. I recognized his careful strokes, the small way he curved his R's, the steady line of his M's. My heart squeezed at the sight. The largest envelope was labeled, "For Evelyn, regarding Adam." I sat back on my heels, breath catching. For Adam? What could he have left for me about our son? I opened it carefully. Inside were documents, bank forms, letters, photocopies, a small ledger filled in by hand. The first page held a simple note: if Adam ever forgets where he comes from, these records will protect what is rightfully his, and yours. My chest tightened. My husband had prepared something. Something important. Something he feared might one day be needed. And in that moment, I knew, this wasn't only about a wedding. This was about the truth that had been hiding right under my roof, waiting for me to find it. I sat on the bedroom floor, the safe door open beside me, feeling as if the room itself had shifted. The mint green dress pooled around my legs, the fabric wrinkled and tired, but I didn't care anymore. All my attention was on the thin, handwritten ledger in my lap, the one my husband had filled out quietly, year after year. At first, I simply traced my fingers over the pages. Rows of numbers. Dates going back more than a decade. Notes written in his careful hand. On the second page, I saw the heading, "Support provided for Adam, documented for future protection." My heart tightened. Each line listed something I remembered only vaguely: school fees I had scraped together, a college housing deposit, car repairs I'd covered when Adam couldn't make ends meet, medical bills from his sports injury, groceries during his first year living alone. But seeing it all together, every cent, every sacrifice, was overwhelming. I hadn't realized how much I'd carried. I hadn't kept track. I had just been a mother. Mothers don't measure love in numbers. My husband, though, he saw something coming long before I did. Tucked inside the ledger was another document. A formal trust document. It outlined Adam's inheritance, larger than I expected, and stated clearly that I was the trustee until Adam demonstrated financial stability and emotional responsibility. It wasn't control. It was protection. I shook my head slowly, realization settling like weight across my shoulders. Karina didn't just want me out of the wedding. She wanted me out of the way. This wasn't personal for her. It was strategic. She saw the inheritance. She saw the house. She saw everything my husband and I had built. And she wanted it. For the first time since the phone call, I felt something sharper than heartbreak. I felt clarity. I carried the ledger to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch, feeling the weight of the truth settle inside me. The house was still, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt aware. As if it, too, had been waiting for me to open my eyes. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. For a moment, I just stared at it. The last words Adam spoke replayed in my mind, a flat, gentle, distant, "It already happened." A part of me still wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding, a mistake that somehow slipped into our lives. But the papers in my lap, the missing invitation, the whispers at the park, they all told a different story. Another buzz. I picked up the phone, half afraid of what I'd see. It was a message from Adam. "Karina thinks you're overwhelmed. Maybe it's best if we take some space." Space. That word broke something small and soft inside me. Space from a mother who raised him alone for years. Space from the woman who worked double shifts to pay for his college textbooks. Space from the only person who never left his side. I read the message 3 times, then set the phone down. For a moment, fear washed over me. Fear of losing him. Fear of confrontation. Fear of being painted as a burden. But then, something shifted. I looked at the ledger, at every sacrifice carefully recorded by the man who once told me, "You carry too much alone, Evelyn." He had prepared this for a reason. And I realized something simple, something powerful. I didn't owe silence. I didn't owe giving. I didn't owe being pushed aside quietly just to keep peace. A quiet strength rose in my chest. For the first time in months, I whispered to myself, "No more." The beginning of my resolve. The next morning, I woke up with a kind of heaviness I couldn't shake, not the kind that keeps you in bed, but the kind that forces you to move with purpose. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the ledger again. Every line felt like proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Proof that something had been unfolding behind my back for a long time. I knew I needed someone who had seen what I couldn't see. Someone honest. Someone who loved Adam enough to tell the truth, even when it hurt. That person was Uncle Walter, Adam's father's older brother. He had always been steady, the kind of man who watched everything carefully but spoke only when it mattered. I called him and asked if he could stop by. He arrived within an hour, hat in hand, eyes filled with quiet concern. "What's wrong, Evelyn?" he asked gently. I told him everything, the missing card, the whispers, the sudden distance, the phone call. I even showed him the ledger. He read every page slowly, jaw tightening with each line. When he finished, he let out a long breath. "I should have said something sooner," he murmured. I frowned. "Said something about what?" He looked at me, regret filling his eyes. "That day at the park," he said softly. "I overheard Karina telling Adam, 'We don't need your mother in every part of our life. Keep her out of the wedding plans. She'll only make us look small.'" My heart dropped. A part of me had known, but hearing it out loud cut deeper than I expected. "She said that?" My voice trembled. He nodded firmly. And Adam didn't correct her. He just stood there. The truth settled between us, cold, sharp, undeniable. But something else settled too. I wasn't imagining anything. I wasn't the problem. And I wasn't alone. Uncle Walter had just given me the first real piece of truth I could stand on. After Uncle Walter left, I sat alone with the truth echoing in my ears. Karina hadn't just influenced Adam, she had shaped his decisions, nudged his thoughts, and convinced him that I was somehow standing in the way of their future. And now the plan made sense: push me out, gain control of him, then gain control of everything my husband and I built. I took a long breath and walked back to the safe. If there was more I needed to see, I would see it. Inside, beneath the ledger, were stacks of receipts clipped together in neat bundles. Some were old, school fees I had nearly forgotten. Others were newer, payments I made when Adam first moved in with Karina, groceries I bought for their early months, rent I helped cover when Adam lost a job he never told her about. The more I looked, the clearer the picture became. Every time I helped them, Karina twisted the story. Every sacrifice turned into an accusation. Every act of love became a reason to take space. My hand smoothed a page from 2 years ago, a transfer Adam begged for when his car broke down. I remembered holding him as he cried, exhausted and ashamed. I remembered telling him he wasn't a failure. Now he blamed me for being too involved. I placed the documents on the table in neat rows. Dates. Amounts. Proof. Then I opened my phone and scrolled through old messages, gentle reminders, encouraging words, notes of support. Side by side, they painted a different story than the one Karina had fed him. For a moment, a wave of sadness washed through me. But behind it came something stronger, clarity. Direction. Purpose. If they wanted to challenge my place in Adam's life, they were about to discover I had the truth and the strength to stand firm. This was no longer about hurt feelings. This was preparing for a fight I hadn't asked for, but would no longer avoid. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a sharp knock on my door. Not gentle. Not familiar. I opened it to find a courier holding a thick envelope. Delivery for Evelyn Morgan, he said. My stomach tightened. I signed for it and closed the door, the envelope cold in my hands. The return address wasn't from Adam or Karina, it was from Morgan Family Council. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a formal council request, submitted by Adam. My name was printed in bold letters under the heading, Request for Financial Disclosure and Release of Trust Funds. Trust funds. The inheritance. But the part that took the air from my lungs was further down, a statement drafted by Karina. Evelyn has withheld funds that rightfully belong to Adam and has made herself a barrier to the stability of our marriage. Barrier. Withheld. Stability. Every word twisted into a weapon. I sank into the nearest chair, the pages rustling like dry leaves in my hands. It wasn't just accusation, it was control. Karina was trying to use the council, the elders who oversaw family disputes, to force me to hand over everything. The phone buzzed in my lap. A message from Adam. Karina said this is the best way. It's nothing personal, Mom. Nothing personal. My fingers tightened around the envelope until it bent. A strange calm washed over me, the kind that appears right before a storm breaks. For the first time, I felt the shift. Not fear. Not heartbreak. Something cleaner. Sharper. Resolve. If they wanted to drag me into council, then council is where the truth would finally come out. This was no longer their plan. This was the turning point. I didn't sleep that night. The council papers stayed on the table, lit only by the small lamp near the sofa. Every time I closed my eyes, the words reappeared, withheld funds, barrier, stability. They were so carefully crafted, so polished, so confidently wrong. By morning, I had made my decision. I dressed simply, gathered the ledger and documents into a folder, and drove straight to the small office building where Mr. Hugo Sterling worked. He had been my husband's attorney years ago, quiet, steady, the kind of man who read every page twice before speaking. He looked up the moment I walked in. Evelyn? What's wrong? I handed him the council request, the accusations bold and cruel on the first page. He read silently, his expression tightening with each line. When he reached the end, he pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose and shook his head slowly. This is weak, he said. Very weak. It won't hold up. I blinked. But they submitted it. They think you won't fight back, he interrupted gently. But the facts don't support this. I'll draft a response and submit a formal request for council review. The elders will want facts. They'll want evidence. And you, Evelyn, have more evidence than they realize. He tapped the ledger with a firm finger. And this, he said. This alone dismantles half their claim. A breath I didn't realize I'd been holding escaped my chest. Relief wasn't the right word, it was smaller, steadier. Something like validation. Mr. Sterling continued, I'll also request a preliminary meeting. If Karina manipulated Adam into filing this, it will show. These things always show. For the first time in days, the tightness in my chest loosened. Not because I was safe yet, but because their plan had a crack. And cracks only get bigger. Driving home from Mr. Sterling's office, I pulled into a small park and parked beneath a row of old oak trees. I didn't plan to stop, it just happened. My hands were still trembling from everything he'd said. The accusations. The lies. The ledger. The fight ahead. But sitting there, watching a few children chase a soccer ball across the grass, I felt something shift inside me. For weeks, I'd been clinging to the idea that Adam would come to his senses, that he'd look past Karina's influence and remember who I was to him. But seeing everything in black and white, submitted in council, sealed by signatures, it hit me differently. This wasn't just about hurt feelings. This was about protection. Protecting what my husband left in my care. Protecting myself from being drained dry. And, in a painful way, protecting Adam from the very person he thought he loved. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. I raised you better than this, I whispered into the quiet car. Not angry. Not pleading. Just honest. For a moment, fear rose again, fear of losing him forever, fear of being painted as the villain, fear of becoming invisible in my own family. But then I remembered the ledger. The park barbecue. The missing invitation. The council filing. Finally, I whispered words I'd never said out loud before. I can love you, Adam, and still refuse to be destroyed. The wind rustled through the oak trees, scattering leaves across the walkway. A few landed on my windshield, forming a small, delicate pattern. In that moment, sitting alone in the quiet park, I felt something shift fully, a calm determination settling like steady weight in my chest. This wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. This was self-respect taking root. And from that root, strength finally grew. The next morning, I returned to Mr. Sterling's office with every document organized in a neat binder, the ledger, the receipts, the old school payments, even the notes my husband left behind. I wasn't shaking this time. My steps were steady, measured, almost unfamiliar to me. Mr. Sterling greeted me with a nod. Ready? He asked. I am, I answered, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. He reviewed the binder, page by page. When he finished, he closed it and rested both hands on it firmly. This is more than enough. I'm filing a formal request today to place the inheritance funds under council supervision, he said calmly. Until the elders review everything, no funds can be accessed without clear proof that Adam is acting independently. He paused, letting the meaning settle. And she won't be able to prove that. A slow breath escaped me, not relief exactly, but something close. A tightening not finally loosening. What about the request they submitted? I asked. Once the elders see this binder, their case collapses, he said. In fact, I'm submitting a protective request to place a temporary hold on any inheritance transfers until the hearing. Hold. The word settled into me like armor. Karina had been pushing Adam toward the inheritance, toward money she believed she could shape, steer, and eventually claim. Now, that path was blocked. Completely. Outside the office, I sat in my car and watched people pass by, walking dogs, carrying briefcases, sipping coffee. Ordinary lives continuing around me. But inside, something powerful had shifted. For the first time since the wedding call, I felt safe. Not because they stopped attacking, but because I finally stopped letting them. They wanted my silence. They wanted my surrender. Instead, I protected what was mine. And the first move was now complete. Word travels fast in families, especially when someone wants it to. 2 days after Mr. Sterling submitted the requests, I started receiving strange phone calls. Not hostile, not angry, just confused. Concerned. Almost rehearsed. First it was cousin Miriam, then Aunt Lottie, then one of Adam's godparents. They all asked the same questions in slightly different ways. Evelyn, is it true you're refusing to help them? Karina said you've been distant. Adam sounded upset. Are you two fighting? We heard you're making things difficult about the inheritance. Inheritance. That was the word they all circled back to, the one they had no business knowing about. Every call tightened something deep inside my chest. Karina hadn't stayed quiet. She hadn't waited for the council date. She had gone straight to the elders and spun a story, one where I was stubborn, jealous, controlling, a mother refusing to let her son grow up. A brilliant tactic, really. If you paint someone as unreasonable early enough, their truth sounds like a lie later. That evening, I stepped outside to get some air. Ms. Ruth Garvey was tending to her rose bushes next door. She looked up and sighed the moment she saw me. Karina's been busy, she said, shaking her head. I spoke with 2 people today. She's calling everyone before the hearing. I sat on my porch steps, my hands folded tightly. She wants to control the narrative, I murmured. She wants to corner you, Ruth corrected gently. But don't forget, Evelyn, lies travel fast, but so does their collapse. I nodded, staring at the fading sunset. Karina thought she was tightening the net around me. But what she didn't know was that the truth was already gathering, quietly, steadily, on my side. And soon, the people she tried to manipulate would be sitting in a hearing room, watching everything unfold. 2 mornings after the phone calls started, Uncle Walter stopped by again. He didn't call first, he didn't have to. He walked in with the same firm, steady steps he'd had all his life, carrying a small notebook tucked under his arm. I figured you might need this, he said, settling into the chair across from me. What is it? I asked. Dates, he replied simply. And details. Everything I've seen with my own eyes over the past year. He flipped open the notebook to a page marked with a corner fold. There, in his tight handwriting, were notes from the park barbecue, the day I'd overheard Karina talking to Adam. But Uncle Walter had recorded more than I knew. Listen, he said, adjusting his glasses. 1 week after that barbecue, I ran into Adam at the grocery store. He told me Karina didn't want him checking in with family so much. He said it was time to prioritize his real future. The words hit me like a dull blow, not sharp, just heavy. And at Christmas, he continued, Karina pulled him aside. Told him not to let his mother guilt him into old traditions. I heard it myself. Clear as day. I felt the room grow still. He closed the notebook. Evelyn, I'm not letting you walk into that hearing room alone. I'll testify. I'll tell the elders exactly what I saw and heard. Our family deserves the truth. For a moment, I didn't speak. His loyalty, quiet, steady, unwavering, filled the space between us. Thank you, I whispered. I didn't realize she'd been working this long, this hard. He nodded slowly. Manipulators are patient. But so is truth. As he rose to leave, he added softly, when the elders hear what really happened, Karina's story won't stand a chance. And for the first time in days, I felt something like grounding. A foundation forming beneath my feet. The truth was gathering. It wasn't loud, but it was becoming undeniable. 3 days before the council date, I received an unexpected call. A young, nervous voice spoke on the other end. Ms. Morgan? This is Tara. Tara Benson. My heart tightened. I remembered her, the polite girl who knew Adam from college. She'd mentioned seeing him and Karina during wedding planning. I hadn't thought much of it then. Now, her voice carried a kind of quiet urgency. I'm sorry to call out of the blue, she continued, but I think I owe you the truth. Within an hour, she was sitting in my living room, wringing her hands together. She looked younger than I remembered, her face pulled tight with guilt. I didn't feel right keeping this to myself, she said. Karina hired me to help with the wedding timeline and communications. Guests, reminders, seating charts, all of that. I nodded slowly. All right. She swallowed hard. She told me to remove your name from every list. My breath caught. She said you caused unnecessary tension and that the wedding would be simpler without you involved. When I hesitated, she told me I'd be paid extra if I didn't question her decisions. I felt the room tilt slightly. Tara continued, voice trembling, and the date, she changed it 2 weeks before the ceremony. Told me not to notify you, even though you were originally on the master list. For a moment, all I could do was stare at her, this young woman who had carried a secret that pierced straight through the heart of everything I'd been enduring. I'm willing to tell the council, Tara said softly. I'll say exactly what she instructed. It wasn't fair. None of it was. I exhaled slowly, deeply, a breath filled with gratitude and grief mingled together. Another truth. Another witness. Another piece of the story Karina could no longer hide. The circle around her lies was tightening. The night before the hearing felt strangely calm. Not peaceful, just calm, like the air right before a storm chooses its direction. I sat at my kitchen table again, but this time I wasn't frozen or trembling. I spread out every piece of truth in front of me, the ledger, the receipts, the inheritance documents, Uncle Walter's notes, and the statement Tara had agreed to submit. It looked less like a pile of papers and more like a map of everything I had survived, everything I had given, everything I was finally reclaiming. Beside the papers sat the small silver gift box with the pearl earrings. I hadn't opened it since the day I wrapped them. The ribbon was still tied neatly, untouched. I picked it up, weighing it in my hand. Those pearls were meant for a moment of unity, of welcome. But Karina had chosen exclusion, humiliation, and greed. I set the box aside gently. It wasn't rejection. It was clarity. In the bedroom, the mint green dress hung on the closet door. It looked softer now, like it held the memory of the day I waited for a wedding call that never came. I touched the fabric lightly, letting my fingers trail down the hem. I'm not wearing you tomorrow, I whispered. Tomorrow isn't a celebration. Instead, I chose a simple dark blazer and slacks, steady, practical, dignified. When I returned to the kitchen, Miss Ruth Garvey knocked on the back door. She stepped inside holding a thermos of warm tea. You ready? She asked gently. I nodded. More than I thought I'd ever be. She glanced at the organized papers. Karina built her story on a lie. You're walking in with truth. I exhaled slowly, feeling the final pieces fall into place. Tomorrow wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. And I was prepared. The morning of the hearing arrived crisp and cool, the kind of weather that made the world feel clearer than usual. I left the house early, carrying the binder against my chest like a shield. The family council building stood quietly at the edge of town, a place meant for truth more than comfort. As I walked up the steps, I saw them. Adam and Karina. They stood at the top of the landing, dressed like a pair attending a business meeting rather than a family hearing. Karina's hand rested on Adam's arm, her posture rigid, her chin tilted with a confidence that felt cold and practiced. Adam looked tired, but he didn't step away from her. He didn't look at me either. I kept my pace steady. Slow. Controlled. When I reached the top, Karina gave me that same polished smile I'd seen the first day we met, the smile that never touched her eyes. Well, she said lightly, I suppose this had to happen. I didn't respond. I opened my binder and held it in both hands. Before we could enter the building, 2 elders from the family council approached us, Aunt Lottie and Elder Raymond, respected, steady, impartial. Their presence meant this hearing would be taken seriously. Very seriously. Everyone inside, Aunt Lottie said. The council is ready. Karina stepped forward, her voice smooth as glass. We're confident the truth will finally come out. She said it loudly, clearly, for the elders to hear. But as she turned toward the hearing room door, Uncle Walter appeared from the hallway behind her, notebook in hand, eyes sharp with purpose. Then, a second figure emerged, Tara Benson, nervously clutching her own folder of documents. Karina froze. Her smile faltered. Because in that moment, she finally realized this wouldn't be her stage. This wouldn't be her story. This time, she wasn't walking into a room she controlled. She was walking into the truth. And the door closed behind us with a sound that echoed like a beginning. The hearing room felt colder than I expected, not bitter, just crisp enough to keep every breath sharp. Rows of wooden benches lined the room, filled with elders, extended family, and a few silent onlookers who had come because family matters, once whispered, tend to draw wider ears. I sat on one side with Mr. Sterling and Uncle Walter. Tara Benson sat directly behind us, clutching her folder like it was the only solid thing she had. Across the aisle, Adam and Karina sat together, though the distance between their bodies told a story of its own. Adam stared straight ahead, jaw tight, while Karina kept smoothing her skirt, her smile flickering each time her eyes swept the room. When the elders entered, everyone rose. The room quieted instantly. Their presence carried an old authority, not of punishment, but of truth-checking. Of accountability. Of history watching. Elder Raymond cleared his throat. We are here to understand the truth behind the requests submitted, and the nature of the accusations made. His eyes moved between our tables. Not assumptions. Not rumors. Facts. Karina lifted her chin, ready to perform. She leaned toward Adam, whispering something under her breath, something she expected only he would hear. But Uncle Walter heard it. I saw his head tilt slightly, his jaw clench. Karina's whisper wasn't affectionate. It wasn't supportive. It was controlling. Just stick to what we practiced. The words landed like a stone in the pit of my stomach. The elder council began with formalities, but the air was already tight, buzzing with a kind of charged silence, the kind that signals a mask about to crack. Mr. Sterling leaned toward me. This is where it begins, he whispered. Stay steady. And as the first testimonies were called, I realized, Act 3 wasn't about proving my worth. It was about exposing the truth they thought I'd never uncover. He walked to the front with stiff shoulders, hands clasped so tightly they almost trembled. He avoided looking at me, not out of anger, but something closer to shame. Or fear. Or both. Elder Mariah, a woman known for seeing straight through excuses, started gently. Adam, she said, in your request, you claimed your mother withheld funds intended for you. Tell us, in your own words, why you believed that. He swallowed hard. Karina, she told me, he stopped. His eyes darted to Karina, who sat rigidly, gaze sharp as a blade. She gave the smallest nod. It wasn't encouragement. It was instruction. Adam inhaled shakily. She told me the inheritance was being controlled. That mom didn't want me to have access. And I thought, he trailed off again. The elders waited patiently. Then Elder Raymond spoke, his voice steady. Son, we will need facts, not impressions. Did you ever ask your mother directly? Adam hesitated. His silence answered for him. Karina's fingers curled around the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles whitened. Mr. Sterling stood slowly. If I may, he said. Elders, Adam did not receive incorrect information, he received manipulated information. Adam's shoulders tensed. For the first time, he looked at me. Really looked. And I saw it, the confusion, the conflict, the painful dawning realization that the version of events he'd been fed may not survive this room. Elder Mariah leaned forward. Adam, why did you not verify the claims made to you before filing a request against your own mother? He opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the sound of truth pressing in from all sides, tightening around the lie he had lived inside. Across the aisle, Karina's jaw tightened. Her story was starting to bend. Mr. Sterling rose again, this time holding the binder we had organized together, the one filled with every proof I never intended to use but now desperately needed. Elders, he said, addressing the elders, I would like to present documented evidence of Ms. Morgan's financial support to Adam over the past 15 years. He opened the binder to the first page, the ledger my husband had written with such patient care. Rows upon rows of dates, amounts, and notes. Payments for school fees. College housing. Car repairs. Rent. Medical bills. All recorded without judgment or expectation. The elders leaned in. Karina did not. She stiffened visibly, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. Adam blinked rapidly, as if the pages were in a language he'd forgotten how to read. Mr. Sterling continued, flipping slowly, deliberately. These entries alone contradict the claim that Evelyn refused to provide support. In fact, they show consistent financial assistance, without repayment, and demonstrate that she never withheld funds. He glanced at Karina. Quite the opposite. A murmur rippled through the room. Aunt Lottie spoke first, voice heavy with disapproval. Adam, were you aware your mother paid these expenses? He swallowed. His voice cracked. No. Karina told me. Karina shot him a look sharp enough to cut through bone. Mr. Sterling straightened. Furthermore, the inheritance documents clearly state that Evelyn was appointed trustee by Adam's father. Not to control Adam, but to protect him. He placed the will addendum gently on the table before the elders. Elder Raymond picked it up, eyebrows rising. These are legitimate. And binding. Karina's face drained of color. Because this wasn't an argument anymore. This was evidence. And evidence was something she couldn't charm, twist, or talk her way through. The elders took their time reviewing the documents, flipping each page slowly, letting the truth settle into the crowded room. The silence wasn't empty, it was judgment forming in real time. Then Elder Mariah set the binder aside and looked directly at Karina. Your accusations painted Evelyn as neglectful and controlling, she said calmly. But these records show years of unconditional support. Years of sacrifice. Her eyes moved to Adam. And no sign of the withholding you claimed. A soft ripple of whispers spread across the benches. Cousin Miriam shook her head. Aunt Lottie folded her arms tightly, disappointment etched across her face. Even a few of Adam's friends exchanged uneasy looks. Karina's smile was gone. Completely. She straightened in her seat, voice tight but still trying to sound smooth. With respect, these records are old. They don't reflect how Evelyn behaves now. She has made things very difficult for us. Miss Lowe, Elder Raymond interrupted, we are not discussing feelings. We are discussing actions. His tone sharpened slightly. So far, the only manipulative actions presented here are yours. Karina's jaw dropped open, just a fraction, but enough for everyone to see the mask slipping. Adam shifted uncomfortably beside her, staring down at his hands. Uncle Walter leaned forward slightly. Truth is truth, he murmured, loud enough for the room to hear. The murmurs grew louder. Judgment, once whispered, was now unmistakably present. The elders weren't the only ones seeing the shift, the entire room was. Karina tried to regain control. We only wanted what's fair. Elder Mariah answered softly, but firmly, and yet fairness seems to be exactly what you feared. The room stilled again, this time with the weight of exposed greed. Karina wasn't just losing the case. She was losing her image. And she knew it. The elders called for a short pause before continuing, giving everyone a moment to breathe. But Adam didn't move. He just sat there, shoulders slumped, staring at the binder as if it were a window into a life he didn't recognize. When the room settled again, Aunt Lottie addressed him gently, the way someone speaks to a person standing on the edge of a truth they can't escape. Adam, she said, tell us, did you ever ask your mother for clarity before believing these accusations? He swallowed hard, eyes glossy. No, he whispered. I didn't. Why? Elder Raymond pressed softly. Adam's voice cracked. Because Karina said my mother would try to control the narrative. She said Mom was interfering, making things difficult. His throat closed. He looked down at his hands. I thought she wouldn't tell me the truth. A wave of pity and disappointment moved quietly through the room. Mr. Sterling stepped forward just slightly. Adam, did you ever see your mother act in any way that suggested she would harm you or block your future? Adam shook his head. No. Never. Karina stiffened. Her fingers clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. And yet, Elder Mariah said, voice steady, you submitted a legal request against your own mother without a single direct conversation. Adam's eyes finally met mine, and what I saw there wasn't anger. It wasn't blame. It was the slow, painful realization that he had been led, and he had followed. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words barely audible. But I didn't nod. Not out of cruelty, but because apologies mean nothing when the truth is still unfolding. This wasn't the end of his accountability. It was the beginning. When the elders dismissed the room for a brief recess, the tension broke like a brittle thread. People stepped into the hallway, whispering in low, urgent voices. Some avoided eye contact with Karina entirely. Others studied Adam with a mix of pity and disappointment. I remained seated for a moment, grounding myself. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I felt steady. Solid. The way a person feels when the truth has already done the work. Adam approached me slowly, like a child walking toward a door he's afraid to open. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I stood, meeting his eyes. "Of course." We stepped aside near a window overlooking the courtyard. The light fell across Adam's face, showing the exhaustion etched into every line. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I really am. I didn't know. I should have asked. I should have." I held up a hand gently. "Adam, the truth is out now. And I'm glad you see it. But we need to talk about more than apologies." His brows knit together. "Okay, what do you mean?" I took a slow breath. "From this point forward, I'm ending all financial support. Completely." His mouth opened slightly. "Mom, this isn't punishment," I continued. "This is a boundary. A necessary one. I've supported you for years, quietly, consistently, without asking for anything in return. But it's time for you to stand on your own." He looked down at his shoes, shoulders slumping. "I don't know if I can." "You can," I said softly. "You must. For your own sake." He exhaled shakily, the truth settling in. "And Adam," I added, my voice steady, "this isn't about choosing between me and Karina. This is about choosing yourself. Your integrity. Your independence." For the first time, he didn't argue. He simply nodded, a small, fragile nod, accepting a boundary he never expected me to set. And in that moment, I wasn't the mother who waited in a mint green dress. I was a woman reclaiming the part of herself she had given away too freely for too long. When the recess ended, I stepped into a small side room to gather myself. The council hall fluorescent lights were harsh, but the quiet space felt like a pause I desperately needed. My binder lay on the table, filled with pages of truth. But beside it, something softer caught my eye, the small silver gift box I had slipped into my bag out of habit. The pearl earrings. I hadn't looked at them since the wedding day that never included me. Slowly, I untied the ribbon and opened the lid. The pearls rested gently on the velvet cushion, glowing with that soft, familiar sheen. They were a symbol of everything I once hoped for: acceptance, unity, a place in my son's new life. I held them in my palm, feeling their faint coolness, and for the first time, they didn't hurt to look at. They didn't sting with the same grief. They simply existed, as memories, as tokens of a love I had offered freely, even if it wasn't received. Beside the box, folded neatly on a chair, was the mint green dress. I had brought it with me by mistake that morning, a last trace of the mother who once believed showing up beautifully might soften a difficult heart. I touched the fabric slowly, carefully. It no longer felt like a costume for a moment I'd been denied. It felt like a chapter, closed, but not wasted. Because I realized something important. That day wasn't about being dressed for Adam's wedding. It was about being prepared for the truth that came after. I placed the pearls back in the box and closed the lid. Not out of sadness, but out of certainty. I didn't need them to welcome anyone into my family anymore. From this point on, my life would not be shaped by who accepted me, but by what I accepted for myself. And that shift, quiet, steady, undeniably mine, was the real beginning of my freedom. When we returned to the hearing room, the atmosphere had shifted. The elders sat straighter, firmer, and the crowd had grown quieter, the kind of silence that comes when everyone senses an ending approaching. Karina tried to reclaim her confidence. She crossed her legs, lifted her chin, and tightened her grip on Adam's arm. But Adam didn't lean toward her this time. If anything, he pulled slightly away. Elder Mariah opened a folder. We have heard testimonies. We have reviewed evidence. And we have one final matter to address. Her eyes fixed on Karina. Your role in this. Karina blinked rapidly. My role? Enough, Elder Raymond said, voice steady but cutting. You manipulated invitations. You moved the wedding date without informing the groom's mother. You instructed a hired coordinator to remove Evelyn's name from all communications. You encouraged Adam to distance himself from family. And you pushed for access to inheritance funds that were never yours. Each word fell like a stone. I didn't, Karina started, but Tara rose from her seat. She did, Tara said softly. Her voice shook, but her honesty didn't. She paid me extra to keep Evelyn off the lists. She told me, this wedding will be better without her. I have the messages if needed. A gasp rippled across the benches. Karina's face drained of color. Her fingers twitched, searching for Adam's hand, but Adam didn't offer it. Uncle Walter stood next. I heard her at the park. She told Adam his mother would make them look small. His voice didn't rise. He didn't need it to. She's been isolating him for months. Karina shook her head wildly. This is ridiculous. They're all lying. But no one believed her anymore. Not the elders. Not the witnesses. Not even Adam. For the first time since I'd met her, Karina's mask didn't just slip, it shattered. And everyone in the room saw her clearly. Greedy. Jealous. Manipulative. Exposed. After the elders adjourned, people rose slowly from the benches, some stunned, some whispering, some simply silent. Karina hurried out first, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she pushed past relatives who no longer offered polite smiles. Adam hesitated, torn between following her and facing what had just happened. I remained seated for a moment, letting the room empty around me. Mr. Sterling gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze before stepping outside to file the final paperwork. Uncle Walter stayed nearby, arms folded, watching Adam with a mixture of protectiveness and sorrow. Finally, Adam walked toward me. His steps were uneven. His eyes were red-rimmed, not from anger this time, but from something heavier, something real. Mom, he said softly, stopping a few feet away. Can we talk? I nodded once, but didn't move closer. I let the space stay between us. It needed to be there. He swallowed hard. I didn't see it. I didn't know. I let her, you trusted the wrong person, I said gently. That happens. But the choices you made, they were still yours. He blinked, shame settling into his features. I hurt you. Yes, I said. Calm. Honest. You did. He took a shaky breath. I want to fix things. I want us to be how we were. I shook my head slowly. Adam, we can't go back. Not right now. Maybe not ever in the same way. His face fell. But, I added softly, you can rebuild. Not through words. Through actions. Through time. Through taking responsibility for your own life. He nodded, tears slipping down his cheek. I'll try, he whispered. I hope you do, I replied. For you. Not for me. And in that moment, it became clear, I wasn't closing the door on my son. I was closing the door on being taken for granted. A boundary had been drawn, firm, steady, long overdue. And it was mine. In the weeks after the hearing, the house felt different, not larger, not emptier, just honest. The quiet didn't sting the way it once did. It felt like space I had finally earned back. I put away the binder of documents in the safe, where it belonged. Not out of fear anymore, but out of respect, for for the truth it held and the strength it had restored. I folded the mint green dress and placed it carefully in a box at the back of my closet. Not as a reminder of pain, but as a chapter one had survived. And the pearl earrings. I kept them in the velvet case, tucked inside my dresser. Not for a daughter-in-law. Not for an apology. For myself. A symbol of dignity reclaimed. Sometimes I walk to the park in the mornings. I sit on the same bench where I once tried to gather myself, watching the children playing soccer the way Adam once did. I breathe deeper now. I stand taller. I feel a steadiness I had forgotten existed. Adam calls sometimes, not out of obligation, not out of guilt. He calls because he is learning to walk without someone scripting his steps. We talk, but carefully. No rushing. No pretending the past didn't leave bruises. Healing is slow, and trust even slower. As for Karina, she faded from our lives faster than I expected. Lies crumble quickly when no one chooses to hold them up. People ask if I ever forgave what they did. But forgiveness, I've learned, isn't always the goal. Sometimes justice is enough. Sometimes boundaries are enough. Sometimes peace comes not from letting someone back in, but from finally choosing yourself. And that's the life I'm building now, quiet, steady, dignified. A life where my worth isn't debated. A life where my love isn't taken for granted. A life reclaimed. One truth at a time. If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it. If you have a unique story of your own, share it in the comments below. Thank you for listening.